Okay. Good morning to everyone. My name is Latoya Burnham. I'm the technical officer responsible for quality promotions here at the CrossQ Secretariat. Good morning and welcome to this webinar. We've been looking forward to this for a while. This morning, we are going to be talking about the CARICOM Energy Efficiency Labeling Program and the impact analysis study that was conducted.
CrossQ has embarked on 2 energy efficiency projects to drive home the importance of standards and quality for the energy sector. These initiatives include the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code and the Regional Harmonized Energy Efficiency Labeling Program, better known as C. CrossQ, the network of national standard bodies in CARICOM, facilitates the regional sustainable energy agenda as it relates to testing, measurement, and inspection procedures to aid in strengthening the energy sector. At CrossQ, our approach to the development and harmonization of standards and quality is integral in transforming the way we use energy in the Caribbean. Our citizens can aspire to a higher standard of living by reducing their energy consumption through use of energy-efficient appliances and constructing safer, cleaner, and more productive workspaces. Through CrossQ's work, consumers will be able to purchase energy-efficient equipment, devices, and appliances with greater confidence and the assurance of quality and safety provided by following the C labels. With the threat of climate change and more active hurricane seasons, countries can mitigate against natural disasters when the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code governs their choices in building construction. To learn more about quality infrastructure in energy, visit energy.crosq.org.
You must read the labels when you're shopping for a fridge. These labels you cannot miss on LED bulbs and CFLs. You'll find them on ACs as well.
The new CARICOM Energy Efficiency labels will help you make better decisions on electrical items you purchase. They show you how much energy is used by each product so that you can save money on electricity in your homes and businesses. Look out for the labels on refrigerators, AC units, and light bulbs. To learn more about these new labels, visit energy.crosq.org.
See labels, read the labels, read the labels carefully. You will see they are the key to energy efficiency. You must read the labels.
And good morning once again. For those of you now joining us, wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Latoya Burnham. I'm the technical officer responsible for quality promotions at the CrossQ Secretariat. And this morning, you're joining us for the impact analysis of the CARICOM Energy Efficiency Labeling Program. Today's webinar is actually brought to you compliments of CrossQ along with our partners in this energy efficiency project, namely German Corporation, the ministry in Germany, as well as the German National Metrology Institute, PTB. And we are actually going to open today's session with some remarks from our partners in Germany. Ms. Leah Spendelman, who's the project coordinator at PTB, will bring us some remarks. Leah?
Thank you, Latoya. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Derek Omar, CEO of CrossQ, Directors of the National Bureaus of Standards within the CrossQ network, from GME Global Consultants, Mr. Alejandro Parodi and Ms. Caroline Champetier, Ms. Janice Hilar, Project Coordinator at CrossQ, representatives of international, regional, and national organizations and agencies, representatives of ministries of energy, utilities, public works, trade, commerce, and consumer affairs, stakeholders in the energy sector across the region and further afield, members of the media, and ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of CUSEC project and of PTB. And for those of you who might not know who we are, the Physikalisch-Technische Bundesanstalt, PTB, is the National Metrology Institute of the Federal Republic of Germany. PTB is Germany's highest and only authority in terms of correct and reliable measurement, and consists of 9 technical scientific divisions and the Department of Technical Cooperation, which realizes development cooperation projects in the field of quality infrastructure across the world. One of our partners in this is CrossQ, with whom PTB has been cooperating for 2 decades. With financial support from the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, PTB has been fostering the CARICOM regional organization for standards and quality in its coordination efforts. PTB has also given technical support to the national standard bureaus of the member states, first in the area of competitiveness and trade promotion, and in recent years also on energy. It was in 2016 when PTB and CrossQ started to address the need to improve energy efficiency of domestic appliances and lighting products sold in the Caribbean. And building on the experiences of individual countries with the establishment of their own standards and testing capacities, the goal of this cooperation is to introduce a regional energy efficiency labeling program for household appliances, as you just saw in the video. And the predecessor project, RDDD, many foundations for such a program were already established. Regionally harmonized standards and label designs were developed. Laboratory capacities were expanded. And the aim of the current project, Quality Infrastructure for Sustainable Development in the Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, in short CUSEC, is to prepare and support the piloting of the label program in interested CARICOM member countries as a preliminary stage for a binding rollout of this program. And for our project, it has been a pretty successful year. The regional database that allows to share product test results between countries went online. We organized a training on issues related to monitoring, evaluation, and verification. In Jamaica, the cooling lab was accredited and testing of refrigerators and air conditioners according to the new standards began. In Trinidad, the lighting laboratory where LED and CFL lamps can be tested was officially launched. Barbados decided to join the group of countries planning to participate in the piloting exercise, and Belize started piloting. All these events in themselves are big steps in the individual countries, while at the same time, they are like puzzle pieces coming together to eventually form the regional labeling program. And another key puzzle piece to the success of the program is raising awareness of the importance of energy efficiency. We are aware that broad public information and support is critical for the labeling program to have its desired impacts. Therefore, it is our continuous and ongoing effort to get everybody on board, legislators as well as retailers and consumers. And one important tool in this endeavor is scientific evidence. Only on the basis of sound scientific evidence can we identify, evaluate, and measure the impacts of the various policy and consumer alternatives in terms of benefits and costs. The impact study that will be presented to us in a moment will help us understand in how far the labeling program meets the intended energy efficiency policy goals, which are financial savings for both consumers and economies, and the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. I'm happy to see that there's broad interest in the findings. And before I give the word back to you, Latoya, I would like to thank CrossQ for their longstanding commitment to our cooperation, especially to Janice, who's my direct counterpart as a project coordinator. She has been responsible for the project since its beginning, has been a very reliable, considerate, and diligent partner. And I think for both of us, it's a pleasure to see that our work is bearing fruit. So yeah, thank you all for your participation.
Thank you as well very much, Leah, for those remarks. And as Leah would have mentioned, the project that we're talking about today is intended to bring energy efficient appliances into our region. And we've been looking over the past couple of years actually at how we do that sustainably and how we get our member states to the point of readiness to actually implement a labeling scheme for energy efficient appliances, as well as getting the testing infrastructure up to scratch. And to give us a little bit more detail in terms of what has been happening in our region, I'm actually going to call on our CEO, Mr. Derek Omar, to bring a few remarks. Mr. Omar.
Thanks very much, Latoya. Directors of all the National Bureaus of Standards within the CrossQ network, Ms. Leah Spindelman, Project Coordinator, PTB, Mr. Alejandro Deba, Partner and Senior Consultant, GME, Global Consultants, and Mrs. Carolyn Champetier, Expert in Energy Sustainability in GME Global Consultants, Ms. Janice Hiller, Project Coordinator, CrossQ, representatives of the international, regional, and national organizations and agencies, representatives of ministries of energy, utilities, public works, trade, commerce, and consumer affairs, stakeholders in the energy sector across the region and further afield, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. The CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, or CrossQ, would like to welcome you here this morning and to thank you for joining us in our presentation of the impact study on the Regional Harmonized Energy Efficiency Labeling Scheme for domestic appliances, air conditioners, refrigerators, and lighting equipment. CrossQ is a network of the Bureaus of Standards within CARICOM. CrossQ was created to support the CSME and its 15 member states in the development and harmonization of a total regional quality infrastructure to include standards, metrology, and conformity assessment, that is testing, inspection, and certification. The pilot Regional Harmonized Energy Efficiency Labeling Scheme for domestic appliances was established by CrossQ in July 2019, in keeping with the Regional Energy Agenda as outlined in the 2013 CARICOM Energy Policy and mandated by the 41st Energy Quoted in 2013. This energy initiative supports CARICOM member states in achieving nationally determined contributions in keeping with international agreements to mitigate against climate change. CrossQ was tasked with three things: the development of energy efficiency building codes, energy efficiency labeling standards and minimum performance standards for domestic appliances and light industrial equipment. We are well into the achievement of this mandate as seen in our internationally published CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code and the development of the energy efficiency labeling standards for minimum energy performances for refrigerators, air conditioners, and lightnings. We have gone even further and developed a framework for implementation of these standards through the establishment of mechanisms to enable compliance and conformity to these standards. This includes the development, as you would have heard, of 2 testing centers of excellence in Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, which will conduct energy efficiency testing for the region. Jamaica in refrigerators and air conditioners, and Trinidad in lighting equipment, and the establishment of procedures both regionally and nationally to guide the implementation of the scheme. We envisage that all domestic appliances and equipment imported to the region will therefore be soon energy efficient. In September 2020, CrossQ undertook an impact study. The study was undertaken with the support of the Strengthening of Quality Infrastructure Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean project, as an initiative funded by the government of Germany through the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. The project being managed by PTB, as you would have heard, in collaboration with CrossQ and Indocal in the Dominican Republic. The impact study, though delayed because of COVID-related reasons, was conducted to determine the expected effect of the introduction and implementation of the labeling scheme on 4 countries which were pilot tested at the time. These countries are Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Belize, and St. Lucia. The ultimate goal of this study is to facilitate the implementation of the scheme in these countries, providing a tool to support informed decision-making as it relates to the scheme. The study provides the baseline to facilitate the measurement and evaluation of the impact of the scheme when implemented, and touches on areas such as energy savings, greenhouse gas emissions, and consumer savings, as well as the impact on economic operators such as retailers and importers. In summary, this study is a critical and valuable tool in forecasting the mid- and long-term impacts of the implementation of the energy efficiency labeling program. We have come a long way since the establishment of the scheme, and we would like to acknowledge the progress of our participating countries. Jamaica has begun full implementation of its national program and is not only conducting tests for appliances for its national programs, but it also stands ready to provide these services to the region. Trinidad and Tobago more recently launched its Energy Efficiency Laboratory for lighting, and Belize has launched its national program for refrigerators. We encourage more countries to join the program and to adopt and utilize freely the tools which have been developed as part of this framework, such as the Regional Energy Efficiency Labeling Standards, Regional Database, and Procedures Manual to inform and support the operationalization of your national programs for energy efficiency management of domestic appliances. Today, as we present to you the findings of this study, we encourage you to see the long-term benefits of the program. We look forward in answering your questions as we look towards future development of the program, and we invite you to partner with us today in joining and participating more fully in the scheme. Thank you again very much for giving us your time and attention to be with us here today.
Thank you very much, CEO, for those remarks. I know everyone is anxious for us to get into this study to hear what has been happening and also what the results of this study have been. But before we do so, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Mr. Alejandro Parodi-Debat is a partner and international expert in energy economics and regulation at the Energy Markets Group, also known as GME, which is a global consulting firm. He has over 25 years of general experience in energy worldwide, ranging from Latin America and the Caribbean to Africa, Asia, and further afield. His training in public governance includes a position as regulation manager in the power, water and sanitation, liquid fuel, and gas sectors. In addition, he has acquired experience as a researcher in science and economy in energy-related matters. He is well-versed in projects related to renewable energy, energy transition in the electricity sector, energy impact studies, energy efficiency, energy planning, regulation and policy, electricity tariff, cost of service analysis, and recommendations of energy financial incentives. He's joined today by Ms. Colleen Champetier, who is an expert in energy sustainability at GME as well, with more than 15 years of experience in the European, Latin American, and African electricity sectors. Her main areas of expertise are energy efficiency, energy planning, system adequacy forecasts, energy transition, energy markets, economic and financial analysis, and tariff impact studies. As a consultant with GME, Ms. Champetier has participated in energy planning studies based on simulation models and optimization of energy systems for Latin America and several African countries. She also participated in studies on energy efficiency and energy transition with a focus on solutions such as energy efficiency, renewable energy, electrification, and green hydrogen. These positions allowed her to acquire a global vision of the energy sector and an understanding of the various issues within that sector. Ladies and gentlemen, I now turn you over to our presenters. Mr. Alejandro, you can share your screen.
Thank you very much indeed. Please tell me. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Me and Pauline, we are very happy to be here. We want to thank, of course, CrossQ, PTV, and all of you for your time. The presentation is organized in 5 chapters. Chapter number, I will be in charge talking in chapter number 1 and coming back in number 4 and 5. But the idea is to start with some concepts about energy efficiency, the benefits of the energy efficiency, the main policies related with energy efficiency. Of course, since we have a lot of measures of policy that we can apply, the methodology of how to know which measure is better than other. Chapter number 2 is related with the general objectives and methodology that we apply in the study. Number 3 and number 4 are related with the results of the analysis. Number 3 related with from the national level, related with energy savings, the estimation of the greenhouse emissions, the avoided fuel cost. And number 4 related with the micro level impact from the point of view of the customers, and also from the economic operators, that is importers and distributors. Finally, our conclusions, recommendations, and lessons learned. As you know, the concept of energy deficiency, indeed, the energy efficiency is related with the optimization of energy consumption to achieve certain levels of comfort and service. But this concept is different when we talk about developed countries or emerging countries like we are. In both cases, it's of course related with the mitigation of the climate change, but the concept of energy efficiency is even more important in emerging, in developing countries, since we have more impact, more reasons. Just to mention 3 or 4. Perhaps the most important is the reduction of dependence on fuel fossils. Most of the countries, of our countries, and also in the Caribbean region, are all importing. Of course, the reduction of dependence means that implies that foreign currency savings, and this is very important for our economies. Second, but even perhaps more important than the other, is that there is a strong relationship between energy inefficiencies, energy poverty, and health problems. So solving problems of energy efficiency is a way to treat also problems with health. Of course, contribute also for solving security and energy access problems. Of course, also related with industrial productivity, since improve the competitiveness of most of the economic sectors. There is a significant number of energy economic policies and measures. Usually, these policies are grouped by sectors. In this case, by households, transport, and business. And in the case of our study, what we are studying is related, of course, with household, and with the introduction of minimum standard and labeling in the appliance equipment. There are also most of the policies are cross sectoral and related with the governance and the finance, and also there are other policies related with utility. I think the strongest signal to adopt efficient equipment is to have a cost-effective tariff. So this is, and we will see that in the study that is the driver, the parameter that impact most in our estimation. Just to highlight some policies, it's important to mention the information, the data, statistics, and evaluation. That's very important to design and to implement policies. It's also very important to have the energy efficiency in the agenda, and it's possible to have a law related with energy efficiency. I think that most of our countries don't have this law, but this is different with developed countries. The policies that I mentioned before also can be grouped depending on which tool they are based on. In this case, we have four groups. The policies based on market-based strategies, price-based, information-based, and also the policies related with performance standard. That could be mandatory, as shows the image, but could be also voluntary. That the study that we carry out is included in this last group. These are the recommendation of energy efficient policies from the World Energy Council. The first one is related with the price that I mentioned before. The second is related with the customer that should be better informed. The third related with the access for financing. The fourth is the quality of energy efficient equipment and service that should be controlled. And the last three is related. The last following two, 5 and 6, related with regulations and monitoring. And finally, and very important also, is the international and national cooperation. We highlight number 2 and number 4 that are related with our study, both in the labeling scheme and also for the minimum standard energy performance policies. So the study is related with these two possible measures. As you know, the goal of leveling is related with the transparency and information in appliance consumption for customers, and just to take a better decisions. And the following figures that appear in this slide shows the empirical effect of both measures. As you can see in the right side, the implementation of the leveling scheme generates like a displacement effect. Indeed, the efficient equipment increase, that is equipment with 3 stars and more. The quantity of inefficient equipment decrease. That's, we are talking about 1 and 4 stars equipment. So this is expected for our countries. As I said, the customers have more information to make the decisions. Also, the producers important are encouraged to improve the efficiency of their products. But you know, all policies, all measures have costs. So the main question here, and that is the reason of our studies, is how to know we have to compare the cost and the benefits, just to know if these benefits are greater than the cost. So what tool should we apply? And it appeared that the concept of what is called in the academia the regulatory impact analysis, RIA. That is a methodology that was first applied by the developing countries in the OCDE. It's a systematic approach to assess ex ante, that is before the positive and negative effects or a proposed regulation or non-regulation alternative. And perhaps even more important is just to avoid unnecessary regulation in competitive markets. So applying this tool, you have the first approach of the benefits, if any, of some policies. What is important of this methodology is that you have to consult the main stakeholders of the sector, and that was done in this study, of course. So I give the floor to Colleen, please, Colleen.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. If you want, you can go to the next slide. So I will present again, even if it was already detailed, as the general objectives of the study, so that to put a name on everything. So the main objectives of the study are, one of them is to determine the expected effect of the introduction and implementation of an energy efficiency labeling scheme. This study has been focused on 4 countries so far, 4 countries which are Belize, Jamaica, St. Lucia, and Trinidad and Tobago. The idea of the study was to make this first approach on 4 of the countries to see if this approach will be potentially extensible and could be developed for other countries of the region. So the idea was to develop a framework for further similar exercises. The study focused on different aspects and different impacts. The first one is energy savings, both in terms of gigawatt hours, like energy really, but also in terms of monetary unit. Then another impact that is analyzed in this study is the avoided greenhouse gas emissions. Then the rest of the impacts are more linked to economic aspects, such as, for example, cost saving for consumers if they decide to buy a new equipment, a new appliance, which is more efficient, consumer purchasing decisions, and finally, an analysis on the impact on economic operators, such as retailers and importers. For this analysis of impacts, we have developed a quantitative model. It's a model in Excel, which is versatile in the sense that it can be easily updated, modified, etc. And the idea with this model was to estimate on a quantitative manner most of the impacts that I just listed. For the two last ones, the analysis is made more on a qualitative mode. But for the rest of the impacts, they are analyzed with the Excel model. It is also important to say that this model, well, the aim is to estimate what will be the impact in the future of the implementation of this energy efficiency labeling scheme. But it can also be used to evaluate the actual impacts once implemented and compare to the projections or the forecasts, knowing that tracking the labeling programs is an important factor for their success. So, Alejandro, you can go to the next slide. So the methodological approach that we have used is based firstly on available data, which was provided either by the countries which participated in the study, the regional organizations, and also on desk research and qualified interviews with the main actors of the sector. The year selected for the base year is 2019. Just to remind to everyone, this study was made in 2021, just after the pandemic. So we decided to take as a base year 2019, which was more consistent and also which guaranteed to have like statistics for all countries. The analysis is until 2030. So the analysis was focused on the years 2021, 2030. For the base year analysis and the first estimations of consumptions of the different appliances, we have used both bottom-up methodology and top-down methodology, which are classically used in this type of energy analysis and planning. So bottom-up methodology means that the estimation is based on parameters from the bottom, such as economic parameters. For example, quantity of appliances, stock of appliances, penetration of appliances in the total quantity of households, their evolution in time, their projected sales, etc. And technical parameters, which is the average energy use of each of these appliances. And to make sure and validate our estimation, we have also processed do a consistency check with a top-down methodology, so that to verify that the value estimated were consistent with the bottom-up approach. The scenarios which are studied are two. Well, there is first a baseline scenario, which will be the business as usual scenario. So what will happen in the next 10 years without doing nothing, like without implementing any new scheme of energy efficiency. And we compare this situation with two scenarios. One of them is adopting a minimum energy performance standard, MEPS, for its initials that I will use later on in the comments in the slide. And the last scenario is considering the adoption of MEPS and also of an energy efficiency labeling scheme. So that are the scenarios studied. Alejandro, you can go to the next one. So this model that we have developed, as I was saying before, it's an Excel model. It needs different data of different types. So different style of data, which can be, for example, regarding economy, demography, appliances, ownership, replacement, and sales. It can also be on different aspects such as unitary consumption per appliances, emission factors, etc. I will present it in the next slide. But in that slide, I give a bit more detail on the type of hypotheses that we analyzed and type of parameters. So for each of them, as we are doing a projection, we have analyzed the historical data to get like a clear view on current situation of the basis, but also historical tendencies for each of the parameters. And on another side, we have analyzed and proposed different forecasts for each of these parameters. So for demographic data, for example, typical data needed are total population, historical demographic growth, household average size, access to electricity, number of residential clients of the national energy companies, that for historical data. And for forecast, in terms of demographic data, we need demographic growth scenarios as it impacts the evolution of the stock of appliances of the country. So that for demographic data. Then when we look at economic data and fuel costs, for example, we have looked, for example, at historical economic growth, so that to have a sense on how has evolved each of the countries recently. And we have elaborated 3 economic growth scenarios which have different impact on future sales of equipment, in particular refrigerators and air conditioning. So it is also an option that the model gives is to look at different situation of economic growth, and that has, of course, an impact on the final impact of this MEPS and labeling. Another assumption that we have made for the future is fuel cost scenarios. And this has an impact, for example, on eventually future tariff when current tariffs are indexed on fuel costs, for example. So this is those aspects that we have considered in the model. Regarding then the aspect of evaluating the quantity of new appliances, we have looked at all what will modify the current stock of appliances, and what will modify it will be, first of all, the replacement of old units. So this replacement happens regularly in time, of course, and it is based on the average life expectancy of each of the appliances. Then another aspect which impacts the total stock of appliances is the new sales due to demographic growth, as with the quantity of residential clients increasing in time, there is a natural tendency of growth of total stock of appliances. And then another aspect is the new sales due to economic growth, especially as we have looked in the past, we see some correlation between the increase in GDP and in GDP per capita in particular, and the penetration of appliances in each of the households. For lighting, we look at different concepts because like for lighting, everyone, every household, every electrified household has access to lighting. So we do not look to how will evolve the penetration of each of the appliances, but we look to the composition of ownership per type of bulbs. Looking to, for example, the penetration of LED, of compact fluorescent lamps, incandescent lamps, and halogen. So we have assumed two scenarios also of increase of share of LED lamps in particular, and we have analyzed that impact, that evolution in the impacts. Alejandro, you can change. Many thanks. So the other hypotheses and inputs of the model are, for example, regarding appliances electricity consumption. So again, we need to define data both for the base year and the historical fleet. So this aspect, and also define, like estimate what will be the average appliances electricity consumption in case of applying MEPS or labeling scheme. So this is all assumptions that we have made analyzing each of the appliances in the region per type and per energy performance, depending on studies already available in the region, which detailed all these aspects. So then we have also elaborated and estimated emission factors for the study in order to then evaluate the impact on greenhouse gas emissions savings. We have also estimated future tariff evolution for each of the countries, and finally generation costs. I don't detail it now because I will come back on this aspect later on in the presentation. You can go to the next slide, Alejandro. So just also as a general introduction and to have some brief aspect on the 4 countries studied, there is some clear differences in some of the countries. In particular, we see that Trinidad and Tobago has a residential electricity consumption more than double than that of the rest of the countries analyzed. It has also a much higher GDP per capita, and it has also a very low electricity tariff. So Trinidad and Tobago, for most of the aspects which have an impact at the end of the day on this study, has different features, we will say. Then if we look to the consumption of electricity in the residential sector, we see that for Belize, St. Lucia, and Jamaica, a large share of the residential consumption is due to the use of refrigerators, lighting bulbs, but there is currently a low participation of air conditioning and water heaters, for example. On the other hand, in Trinidad and Tobago, there is a much higher average consumption, and there is an higher impact of the latter two appliances. Regarding electricity tariffs in Caribbean countries, we see that in general they are high, mainly because most of the countries in the region are dependent on expensive imported fossil fuels to produce electricity, so that it reflects in electricity tariffs. It is particularly true in St. Lucia and Jamaica, but the case of Belize and Trinidad and Tobago are a bit different. Then regarding emissions factor, what we see when we look to these four countries is that Belize has a much lower emission factor from the rest of the countries analyzed. And I will come back to that in another slide where it is presented in more detail. You can go to the next slide, Alejandro. So now I go to the impact analysis on the first main topics, which are energy savings, avoided fuel cost, and greenhouse gas emissions savings. So energy savings, they are evaluated both in terms of physical units. So it is directly proportional at the end of the day to the unitary consumption of each appliances in each of the situation, business as usual, MEPS and MEPS plus labeling. And this section also analyzes energy savings in terms of monetary units. To do so, we have analyzed the generation cost in each of the country. We have analyzed historical tendency, so that to be able to project what could be the evolution of future generation costs. So what we see here is that Jamaica and St. Lucia have generation costs, which is quite correlated to crude oil price. And this is what we assume for the future with a scenario of evolution of crude oil price as well. For Belize, in the past, the generation cost has been rather stable, and it is due mainly to the composition of the electricity fleet, which is largely renewables, and there is also large imports from Mexico. In Trinidad and Tobago, there is also a price which has been in the past quite stable, especially because the price of the natural gas, which is largely used in the generation fleet, is subsidized and has been quite constant as well. So this is like the hypothesis that we use for projecting the future. Alejandro, you can go to the next one. So now I will present, so that not to make the presentation too long, I have selected, no, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, I will just present for each appliances, one country, just to give you a flavor of what contains the model. And then there is some slides of conclusion and comparison of the 4 countries, so that to see all of the countries together. But the idea was just a bit to comment what type of analysis has been done without presenting, well, 4 countries multiplied by 3 appliances. It would have been a bit long to present it in detail, but the type of graphics and figures that we have in the model, for example, if you look to the green graph, for example, in this graph, one can see on one side, like looking to the right axis, you see the evolution of the penetration of refrigerators in the total quantity of residential clients. It is something that has grown historically and that we expect will continue growing with the expected increase of GDP. And another aspect that one can see also in this graph is the progressive replacement of old refrigerators, which are each year proportionally replaced. So that is one aspect that can be seen in this type of graphic. Then the blue graph indicates at national level the total consumption per year for refrigerators in the 3 scenarios. So business as usual, MEPS and MEPS plus labeling scenario. And as you see in this case in Jamaica, we expect some decrease of this total consumption in all the case, because there is a natural, well, in the business as usual, there is a decrease because there is a natural tendency of improvements in appliances. And in the case of MEPS and MEPS plus labeling, there is a stronger decrease thanks to the prohibition of use of the less efficient appliances and the impact on consumer choices. In the yellow graph, one can see the reduction which is expected in each of these 2 scenarios, MEPS and MEPS plus labeling, for each of the years of the study. And finally, in the red graph, one can see the avoided fuel cost compared to business as usual. So fuel cost also at national level for the generation fleet. So yeah, so if you want, you can go to the next slide, Alejandro. Alejandro, you can go to the next slide if you want. I still see the same one. I'm not sure if it has changed for you.
No, we're still seeing the same slide. Alejandro?
I'm sorry. But something happened with start again with sharing the. Can you see now the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's see what's happening. Okay, now I think it's functioning.
Perfect.
Sorry.
Yes. Thank you.
Many thanks. So in the case of lighting, the analysis is a bit different, as I said before, because all of the electrified households already have access to lighting. So the analysis is focused on the increase of the share of each type of lighting, with, as you can see here, a strong increase in LED use and share. And at the end of the decade, this LED share terminates to be really dominant. It was already widely used, but it terminates to be dominant at the end of the decade. And again, in terms of total annual consumption, there is a natural tendency to see like decrease of this consumption because LED less consumption is really much more efficient than old solutions such as incandescent lamps, for example. But with the application of energy efficiency measures, we can expect much more reduction of the total consumption and energy savings, which can be of almost, for example, in this case of St. Lucia in 2030, 24% in the case of the application of MEPS plus labeling. The avoided fuel cost is also quite significant. Also, if one compare it to other countries, for the size of St. Lucia, which is much smaller, it is much less than, for example, the expected values for Belize. But it is mainly due to the size of the countries. You can go to the next slide. And finally, air conditioners. It is a bit the same logic than what was presented for refrigerators. The main difference here is that the penetration of uses of air conditioners is much lower. I have shown Trinidad and Tobago in this case because it is the country of the fourth, which has more quantities of use of air conditioners. But in any case, we expect that the penetration of use will evolve, but will evolve slowly in time. And thanks to the application of MEPS and MEPS plus labeling, one can expect a quite significant reduction as well. In 2030, for MEPS and labeling, it is around 70% of reduction. And in terms of avoided fuel costs, in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the expected avoided fuel cost is very significant if one compare it to refrigerators and lighting. You can go to the next slide, Alejandro. So here, just a bit to summarize and have like a better view of this analysis on avoided on energy savings, avoided fuel cost, and avoided greenhouse gas emissions. The two slides that you see, the one above is for the MEPS scenario, the one below is for MEPS plus labeling. In each graph, you have the size of the bubbles represents the energy savings, and the number inside it is also representing the energy savings in the period 2021-2030, the total. Then in this graph, you have on the x-axis the avoided fuel costs, and on the y-axis the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So when one look to that graphics, you already have compiled like 3 of the main impacts in one unique graph. And what one can see is that Trinidad and Tobago, as it is the largest economy of the group, and it has like also a larger stock of appliances, etc., as the bigger like expected energy savings in gigawatt hour. However, the avoided fuel costs, thanks to these measures, are greater in Jamaica, because the electricity generation cost in Jamaica is much higher than in Trinidad and Tobago. So there is this modification in the ranking that we could say between the four countries. In the graph on the right, this graph only shows the avoided fuel cost, and as I was saying, we see that the bigger ones are for Jamaica. You can go to the next slide, Alejandro. So then in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, just to present also a bit what was done, we have did two things. On one side, we have done a desk research on official values for grid emission factor. However, these data were not always corresponding to the same years, not always corresponding to the same source. So we have preferred to double check these estimations, and have done also our own estimates based on the generation mix, the consumption of fuels for electricity generation, and the typical emission factor for each of the fuels. And as you can see here in this table, we see that the grid emission factor in Belize is much lower than the four other countries, given the composition of its electricity fleet. On another side, the rest of the free country have quite high emission factors. This, when you see lower and upper limits, it is because we have studied different years, and there has been some modification in the generation fleet in the historical years, so there is different results. Finally, to focus on this greenhouse gas emissions, there is this graph on the right that shows the impact in each country. And as you can see here, the greatest potential impact on emission reduction is observed in Trinidad and Tobago. This is justified by the size of its economy, the higher level of appliances penetration, especially air conditioning, and also the high grid emission factor in that country. On the other extreme, we have Belize. Belize, which has, well, is a smaller economy compared to, well, there is smaller quantities of appliances, I will say, and there is a very low grid emission factor compared to the rest of the country. So Belize has the lower value for greenhouse gas emissions. You can go to the next one. So I give the floor now to Alejandro. I think you are in mute for the moment, Alejandro.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Colin. So related with impact to in a micro level, we estimate what we call the consumer cost savings, the consumer purchasing decision, and also we analyze the impact, the possible impact on the economic operators. Just to make an estimation of cost saving, we we need to both to define what we call the typical consumer, and also to project the tariff over the period analysis that is 10 years. So we define a typical consumption with 220 kilowatt hours per month. We assume that the tariffs remain constant in real terms, that is, over these periods, except to those that have a specific charge in fuel, and that in this case we adjust these tariffs according with the fuel price scenario. As we expected, as I said before, and also Colin remarked, is that the results are highly dependent on current tariff. So the countries with higher rates, that is Jamaica and Saint Lucia, have greater savings, and on the other side, we have Trinidad and Tobago with the lowest savings, since it has the low tariffs. And Belize shows a medium saving numbers. Related with the previous point is the consumer purchasing decisions. As you know, the average residential consumer don't see the attribute energy efficiencies in their or don't take this attribute when purchasing equipment. Since, to be honest, it's not easily quantifiable. Both because they don't know the price of electricity, and also they don't know the consumption of each equipment. So that is the reason why it is important to implement a kind of leveling scheme. In this table, we see the replacement period, that is the period necessary to recover the investment in each country, and for the three appliances studied. As it can be seen, the lowest the tariff, the more time you need to recover the investment, the initial investment, and this is very clear in the case of Trinidad and Tobago. For both, especially for refrigerators and lighting. In the other cases, in the other for the other countries, this replacement period between 1 and 2 or 3 years seems to be reasonable. Okay. Related with economic operators, as I said initially, we made qualified interviews with many operators in all the countries, and in all cases they expected not to have greater costs in the implementation of this scheme, and also perhaps in some cases could be even beneficial, since the relationship between the seller and the buyer will be more tight, I mean more deeper. What perhaps could be the the segment with the most important or significant impact is related with the low income sectors, especially if you decide to implement a minimum standard measure. Okay, so we have now in the last chapter with conclusions and recommendation. What's in our understanding is very obvious, and we have no doubt is that whatever the scheme you apply, to be leveling scheme or minimum standard, on these appliances have a positive effect in all the countries analyzed. In energy savings, reduction of the greenhouse emissions, the customers, as we see recently, have benefit perhaps in some cases with a replacement period quite long. We also we don't see negative effect of both in importers and retailers. So this is the main conclusion of our study. As a consultant, our opinion is the richness of the model. I mean, in this study we have both the results that we have just tell you, and also the tool indeed. And in our opinion, that the richness of this study is true, that we have now the 4 countries have a model and have the possibility to use it. So for that you need some implementations in the case you decide to make these policies, and also a kind of maintenance of this tool. In implementation, we recommend both to design and to and a dissemination and awareness campaigns, and also to make a regular public opinions surveys related with this kind of policies. As I told you, this model should be seen as a dynamic. So in the future to compare the result of our result with the real numbers, that is very important. So in this case you have to ask for information from customs and of course to compare what we project in penetration in this equipment with what is indeed happening in your countries. We also think that the study should be updated at least every five years at most. And but it's also important that you have a hub in information in the region, the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, that will be a very good environment to compare information, experiences with this topic. Finally, and perhaps more important, from our opinion, you have now a prediction frame for the region. What we did in 4 countries, that's possible to do in the rest of the CARICOM countries. That would be very nice, since with the same methodology it's possible to compare the result of not only these 4 countries, but also for all the members of CARICOM. So I encourage you to use the model, to analyze, to play with this Excel with different assumptions to improve the data that is possible, and compare results between countries. That's all from us. This is just a table that resumes the recommendation, and you have an annex with the result of the customers' cost saving for each country. So thank you very much indeed. Now we are open to your comments, suggestions, etc.
Thank you very much, Alejandro and Colleen, for the presentation. It's been very interesting. The figures speak for themselves. We will open for another 10 to 15 minutes for questions. If there are questions in the audience, I'm going to ask you to utilize the buttons at the bottom to raise your hand if you wish to pose your question, or you can put your question into the chat for the presenters to answer your posed question. But in the meantime, while we wait to see if anyone has any additional questions, I'm just going to, we do have a question quickly. Renee Abbas, Trinidad and Tobago, is asking, are the C reduction values presented the total savings in C production in customer production to the 2030 or annually?
Both carbon emission.
Carbon emission.
The carbon emission, the model in itself analyzed year by year, but it has also a summary table which sum up the total from 2021 to 2030.
Okay, thanks for your question, Renee. Are there any other questions in the audience? I would, however, like to go to our in-house project coordinator for a second. I know that our consultants would have been working with us for a while to gather all of the information that you would have seen presented during the last hour and a half or so. But what I wanted to do is to actually draw our project coordinator, Ms. Janice Hillier, in to discuss what are the next steps. Where do we go from here within the CARICOM region and especially the CrossQ network? I'm putting her on the spot.
So yes, Mr. Omar in his remarks gave a brief context or background to the scheme, and he highlighted some of the things that we've done. Our intention when we started the R3E project, which Leah mentioned in her remarks, was to develop a model. So the model consisted of the piloting countries as well as the various tools that we've developed. So what to do and how to do it. And right now we're trying to encourage our member states to uptake, to start to join the scheme, to join the program, and to start implementing the program nationally. And that is the only way that we can succeed. So we administer regionally at CrossQ, but national implementation happens at the national level. As to this direct activity, the impact study, what we want to do is to make the study of a publishable standard, and we will hand over to member states, to the bureaus, to the ministries of energy, to those agencies that are responsible in terms of implementation or policy decisions, so that they could have it as a tool to inform them in the decision-making process.
Yeah. So for those of you in the audience who are interested in seeing the actual full study, it will be available. We're hoping sometime within the first quarter of next year, fingers crossed and knocking on wood. There is a question from Uri Krivishik. Hi, Uri. Do you want to actually ask your question live, Uri?
Okay, yes, hello, good morning,
Hi.
everyone.
Good morning.
And thank you for the very interesting presentation. I was just wondering, for the maps and the energy labeling, is there any definition in your model how stringent these maps would be? I mean, what is the exact definition of what level the maps would be introduced for individual product categories, and possibly if it would be also changing between now and 2030, because that would influence, of course, the physical savings from the product categories. Thank you.
I take it, Alejandro?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay. Well, so for the stringency of the maps, actually we have relied on another study which has been made for all the region of the CARICOM by CROSP, and which was analyzing the impact of different existing maps in different countries, and especially we have considered the one which is actually applied in Mexico mainly. And then for the period towards 2030, we haven't considered that there will be a modification of this value at some point in time, because it is like, well, we consider one flat consumption for each type of equipment, whether they are like the current equipment now, whether maps is applied, or whether maps plus labeling. In the true life, I would say, of course, in all the countries which have maps applied, this value is usually updated regularly, because otherwise it kind of terminate to be outdated compared to all the equipments already comes. But in our model, it is not something which is considered. And regarding updates in time, what's that? I thought it was another question. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, that's very useful. Thank you.
Okay. I do not see any other questions. You can bear in mind, you can still reach out to the CrossQ Secretariat. You can email us if you still have any questions, and we will see how we can get those answers back to you. But if there are no other questions, I would like to say thank you very much to Mr. Alejandro Perardi Debat. Aha, there is a question. In your study, Mr. Knowles, do you wish to pose your question live, or do you just want me to read your question? Okay. In your study, did you produce a chart that shows the magnitude of gain between reducing generation costs to the implementation of this?
Well, we haven't produced exactly this analysis. Actually, the hypothesis on generation costs, depending on the country, either for some countries it is flat. We have assumed that it will be flat in the future because it has been kind of stable in the recent years. For some other countries, we have correlated it to the evolution of crude oil prices, and we have assumed one scenario of crude oil prices, knowing that, of course, this scenario can be updated. The study was done in 2021. Current situation is much different than what was expected for the short term. But for 2030, probably there is not so many differences. But we haven't analyzed whether it was more interesting to work on, well, to invest in reducing generation costs or to invest in energy efficiency. But usually energy efficiency is always the first step in any transition policy, I would say.
Thank you for that. Mr. Knowles, are you satisfied your question's been answered? Okay, I'm assuming. I see your mic is open, but I'm not hearing anything on our end. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I do not see any additional questions and no raised hands. And no raised hands, that's fine. So we will move to the vote of thanks for this morning's session. I will ask Ms. Janice Hillier to please deliver the vote of thanks for today.
Okay, thank you, Latoya. The CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality CrossQ would like to thank you, our valued stakeholders, for joining us today for the presentation of the impact study on the Regional Harmonized Energy Efficiency Labeling Scheme. We are indeed pleased with the level of interest which has been shown today. We want to start off by thanking the presenters on the level of effort which has gone into this exercise. It took months and months of research and meeting with stakeholders as well as meeting with ourselves to get us to this point today. And we thank you for the wonderful job you've done in presenting. We wish to acknowledge the directors of CrossQ for your guidance in the labeling scheme and our international development partners in this initiative, especially the German National Metrology Institute, PTB, for your long-term support and collaboration, having been with us from the conceptualization of the scheme in 2015 to present. We thank our regional partners who are here today and the National Bureaus of Standards who have joined us, especially those who are piloting with us and who volunteered to work with CrossQ in the development and implementation of the pilot scheme. We thank especially the energy professionals and representatives of the various ministries of government who have joined us. The decision makers, policy makers, and influencers who are instrumental in the uptake of the scheme at the national level. We implore you to become champions of the scheme. Your advocacy and acceptance will facilitate the participation of your countries in this important program. We look forward to forming partnerships with you as we move forward and continue to develop and evolve the program to achieve the region's objectives and to expand implementation at the national level. Once again, we thank you and we wish you a good day.
Thank you very much, Janice. You can stay tuned as well to our social media for when the study is actually available and has been presented to the region's governments, and also so that you can get your hands on a copy of the final published version of the impact study. So thank you once again for having joined us today, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
CrossQ has embarked on 2 energy efficiency projects to drive home the importance of standards and quality for the energy sector. These initiatives include the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code and the Regional Harmonized Energy Efficiency Labeling Program, better known as C. CrossQ, the network of national standard bodies in CARICOM, facilitates the regional sustainable energy agenda as it relates to testing, measurement, and inspection procedures to aid in strengthening the energy sector. At CrossQ, our approach to the development and harmonization of standards and quality is integral in transforming the way we use energy in the Caribbean. Our citizens can aspire to a higher standard of living by reducing their energy consumption through use of energy-efficient appliances and constructing safer, cleaner, and more productive workspaces. Through CrossQ's work, consumers will be able to purchase energy-efficient equipment, devices, and appliances with greater confidence and the assurance of quality and safety provided by following the C labels. With the threat of climate change and more active hurricane seasons, countries can mitigate against natural disasters when the CARICOM Regional Energy Efficiency Building Code governs their choices in building construction. To learn more about quality infrastructure in energy, visit energy.crosq.org.
See labels, read the labels, read the labels carefully. You will see they are the key to energy efficiency. You must read the labels when you're shopping for a fridge. These labels you cannot miss on LED bulbs and CFLs. You'll find them on ACs as well.
The new CARICOM energy efficiency labels will help you make better decisions on electrical items you purchase. They show you how much energy is used by each product so that you can save money and electricity in your homes and businesses. Look out for the labels on refrigerators, AC units, and light bulbs. To learn more about these new labels, visit energy.crosq.org.
See